Hello, I promised you that I'd share with you how I make my masks. So here's me giving this a go. I've got my trusty friend with me. He's called Malcolm. He's very useful, as you can see. And I've got his friend with me as well, but well, she's not got a head, so she's not that useful. Anyway, so I'm going to show you first of all what you're going to need in order to do this mask. So I did say for Julius Adams that I would try a different accent. Here's my different accent, but I can't keep it up, Julius, so I'm not going to go there. So the first thing you're going to need is an overlocker. I did have one called Orville, but I've got a new one now called Oliver Overlocker. If you haven't got an overlocker, it doesn't matter because you can use zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. But I love my overlocker, so that's a good thing to have. Secondly, you will need a sewing machine. Here's my sewing machine. I love it very much. It hasn't really got a name, but I'm thinking of one. You'll need a little ironing board. Ironing is really, really important in this process. So there is my iron. And of course, you're going to need lots and lots of material. Scraps will do, but the sort of waxed cotton material is the best stuff. This is really, really good. It's a sort of waxed cotton and it makes quite a nice stiff mask once you've used it. I've actually made some templates so that I can quickly cut out my masks. You can see those here, and I made myself some instructions as well on the back of the template. I've also got a cutter, which I'll show you how I'm using in a minute, and some twist tie, which I got from Amazon, and that goes in the top of the mask so that you can mould it over your nose. So you can see here I've got a big template for bigger faces and a standard template here for normal size faces. You'd need to make an even smaller one for children, but not too much smaller. So I'm just about to cut out my material. You can see that I've used this quite a lot. Just a point to note, I've washed my hands thoroughly before doing this. So I'm going to position my template over the material, and I've got some weights which I put on just to keep it still while I cut out material, and this is really, really, really handy tool. There. Okay, it's just caught in the corner. Okay. So the next thing to cut out is the bias binding, and what I do is just fold the material over so that you can get two of these, and you're putting the bias strip on a 45-degree angle, and the reason for doing that is because it stretches and flexes a bit better, because this bit's going to go on the side of the mask. So you can see I've put it at an angle. Okay, so here we are, two bits of material. So here are my pieces of material. One long rectangle and two pieces of material that size cut on the bias. So your rectangle is 38 centimetres by 19 centimetres, okay, and your bias strips are 10.5 centimetres by 5.5 centimetres. That seems to work quite well for me. So the next thing you're going to do is overlock the short edges of your rectangle, and if you haven't got an overlocker, no problem, just use a zigzag stitch quite close together on your sewing machine. You can see this is what the overlocked edge looks like. It just keeps it from fraying. Just doing the other side. There you go. Second edge overlocked. There you go. So next thing I'm going to do is iron my rectangle so that it's nice and flat. And actually the heat from the iron is quite good at making sure that this is really, really clean as well. Although you can wash your material first. So I'm going to snip the edges of the overlocking on so there's no untidy threads hanging, because they'll just get in the way otherwise, so snip those off. And then the next stage is right sides together, so that's the right side, fold over and then put a couple of pins in just to keep it secure, like so. You see, so 2 pins in there to keep it secure. And then I'm going to mark 4 centimetres from the edge. Now this is just a little bit of paper that's 4 centimetres long here, so that from each side 4 centimetres in that way, 4 centimetres in that way, I'm going to put a little mark. And I don't know whether you can see those 2 marks in pink on the video, just about. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to sew from the edge up to that mark, and then I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to sew from that edge up to that mark and then stop, which will leave a gap in the middle. Okay, so here's my material. I'm going to use a standard seam width, and I'm just going to sew up to that mark, bit of reversing and finish it off. Take it out, go to the next bit, bit of reversing to lock the stitch and finish it off. So this is where I've sewn. You can see just 4 centimetres in with a gap in the middle. So here I am on my ironing board again. Okay, and I'm just going to put that seam in the middle there and just flatten it out with the iron. Okay. And you can see that there's a gap left in the middle here. The next thing I'm going to do is use some of this wonderful stuff called Wonder Seam, Wonder Web, whatever you want to call it, but basically it fuses the seam. So instead of having to over sew it, you can just use this stuff to fuse that seam. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces of those to the same length as my seam, and very carefully fold the stuff within the seam each side. So I'm doing the first side now. I'm folding it over and getting that hidden within the seam, because otherwise it will get sticky on your iron, and then you basically iron it down. And it's brilliant stuff, and it saves a lot of time. I'm going to do the same on the other side. There you go. So now your seam is welded down. There you go. And I'm going to turn it the right way round now. So here we are. Here's the right way round. And you can see the gap in the middle there. The next thing to do is just a little bit more than 1 centimetre above where the seam is. You're going to fold it down just a bit more, 1 centimetre and about 3 millimetres, so 13 millimetres, something like that is absolutely fine. And then I'm going to flatten it down with the iron. Okay, so you can see what I've got here, and that's where the gap is. And now I'm going to go and get some twist tie, which you can get from Amazon, and that's the stuff that you use to close plastic bags with, and it's what will allow you to be able to mould the mask around your nose. And you need to cut a length which is just a bit short each side. There you go. And then what you're going to be doing is placing that twist tie just inside the top edge. right at the top. And what I generally do is pin that in so that when you sew it, it can't creep out. I'm just checking that it's inside the pins. So here we are. So the twist tie is right at the top there, right at the top, and it's being held securely by those pins. Okay, so now we're going to sew a line just where the pins are, but we're also going to do a line all the way around the square. So, okay, let's take it from there. So, a very thin seam allowance around here, but you'll see that once I've done it. So pivot at this point. Okay, and then cut a thread. So you can see where I've sewn. So this contains the twist tie in here. You can see you can mould it and it will just stay in shape. That's so that it can go around your nose. And it's all round. You can trim off any dodgy edges at this point. Okay, so then we're on to the next step. So in this next step, you're going to be making pleats. So you need to have it so that the gap is underneath, okay? And you're going to be making the first pleat, which I'd say is about 3/4 of an inch of the way up. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm lifting this bit here and I'm placing it down. And then important to iron it with a hot iron, iron that pleat flat, and then secure it with a pin each side. And it takes 3 pleats, so I'm going to do the second one. And again, secure that with a pin each side. And then the final 3rd pleat. And what you want to do is not get in the way of the gap on the other side. So I'm just going to iron this flat and then check. But I'm not in the way of that gap. And no, I'm not. See, the gap's still okay. It's not sort of folding on that gap. So pin both sides. So you can see, here we are. And the next step will be to sew down and secure each of these sides here. So here we are. I'm now going to sew down each of these sides. Side number 1 and side number 2 coming up. There we go. So I can take the pins out now because it's secure down both sides. So pins coming out. I'm going to iron it flat again just to make sure that everything is really nice and flat. Might give this edge a little trim just so that it's nice and flat. And this one, get rid of any stray bits of cotton. And the next step is to attach the bias binding. And you want to make sure that it's the right way up, so the side that hasn't got the gap in. That's the gap side, you can see there's the gap. You want this side, you want that flat like that. And you want to make sure that right side up bias binding, line your mask up, fold these edges over and iron them flat. And put a pin in. Same the other side. Iron it right to the edge. turn it round and do the same with the other piece of bias binding. So again, right side up, so that when you fold the flap over, the flap's showing the wrong side. And secure that with a pin. Same the other side. Secure it with a pin. So you can see what we've got here. On the other side it looks like this. Okay, and what we're going to do is again sew down that side there, and again on that side there. So just to remind you, we're going to be sewing across there. That's the first side done. Get the second side done. So here's our stitch and the other side. So take the pins out, so 2 each side. And now what you're going to do is just take these and pull them round to the other side, so you can see it sort of looks like this. Now you've pulled it, and you're going to iron that flat, including the little over flat bit. So it looks like that when you've ironed it flat. Okay, that's that side, and then that side. I'm going to do the same to the other side. So again, just take it and pull it round like this, and then iron that flat. So now you've got something which looks like this. Okay, that's the right side, and that's the wrong side with your little pocket. And what I'm going to do now is take that bias binding, fold it over once and fold it over again, and iron that flat, and then secure it with a couple of pins. And this is the channel that your elastic's going to go into. So you can see what I've got here. I'm just going to secure that edge with a couple of pins, so it looks like that, and do the same the other side. Fold over once, fold over again, iron it flat, secure it with pins. There, and then what we're going to do is really carefully secure that as close to that edge as we can with a line of stitches, and that forms a channel for the elastic to go through. So the stitch line has got to go as close to that edge as you can, so that it's really neat on each side. So you can see, there's my stitching. I'm just going to finish the other side off. And there we are. Okay. So take the pins out. Tidy up any overhanging threads, just so that it's nice and neat. And you can see that we've got the basis of a mask now. We just haven't got the elastic in. The elastic's going to be the next bit. But you can see when it's opened out, that will form a very good mask. And on the inside, that's where we'll be putting some filters in. Okay, so next stage, elastic. The next bit is to secure the elastic, and you're going to need, for a standard mask, 2 lots of 25 centimetres. So let's just measure that out. One lot. 2 lots. 2 lots 25 centimetres. And I find using a bodkin really helpful to pull the elastic through the seam. So just thread the elastic into the eye of the bodkin, and you might need to wiggle this through, but you can see the edge here. Sometimes it takes going through the other edge of the seam, because it can catch sometimes in the overlap, but eventually you'll find it, and once you do, you'll be able to pull it through. So there we are. So then you pull the elastic through. So there's 1 knot of elastic through that side. Just doing the other side. Some people use a safety pin to do this, but I found that really frustratingly hard. So second knot going through. So now we've got both of our elastic through, and the trick now is to tie it and pull it back through the seam. So don't make a really generous tie. You need to knot it as close to the edge as you can without it coming undone. So sort of like that. I don't know whether you can see that. And then pull it tight, but so it doesn't come undone. Yeah, that's pretty secure. So like that. And again, same the other side. The beauty of these masks is that they're washable as well. They've got a pocket for a removable filter, which you can keep changing, but they are washable. So there's a second side. So we've got to get these knots through that seam. So just pull it through. And you might find it a bit tricky to get that through. So I use a pair of tweezers just to help get it through that seam. And there it is. That looks nice and neat now. You can't see the knot. And the same on the other side. So pull it until you get the knot right by the seam. Use your tweezers just to encourage the knot through. It can be a little bit tricky this way, but you certainly don't want to be using your nails. So there you go. So there you go, neat mask. And here's your inside pocket. This is where you're going to be putting a filter. And you can use all sorts of things for a filter. You can use doubled up material, you can use J cloths, but what I use, vacuum cleaner filters. So cut to size, an appropriate size. That should do. Remember, you're going to keep changing these. So there's your filter. It's really thick, and that goes into the inside pocket and makes a really good barrier for snot, for sneezes, for coughs. There you go. So it's really thick. Actually a very thick mask. There you go. So there's your mask. So opens up, molds around your nose. I'm going to just try it on my trusty assistant Malcolm. Hold on a minute. So here's Malcolm, lovely Malcolm, modelling the mask. You can see that you can squeeze this bit so that it's moulded nicely around Malcolm's nose. Here he is in his full splendour. Thank you, Malcolm, for being such a fantastic assistant.